Life had its own way of being unremarkable for me. My name's Rita, and at 29, you'd find me tucked away in the local library. It wasn't glamorous or thrilling, but it was mine. The books were my companions, and the dusty shelves my domain. I wasn't one for the spotlight, happy to fade into the background. The town was small, the kind where everyone knew your business before you did. My daily routine rarely varied. Wake up, work, and then home to my tiny apartment filled with secondhand furniture and a mountain of books. My social life was non-existent, and I was fine with that, or so I kept telling myself. Ethan came into my life on a day much like any other. He was looking for a book, something different, he said. His smile was easy, and his voice had a warmth to it that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Hey, could you help me find a book? I'm feeling adventurous, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Sure, what genre are you interested in? I asked, adjusting my glasses, trying not to get too caught up in his gaze. I don't know, surprise me, he replied with a grin that suggested he enjoyed the mundane challenge he'd set before me. That was the beginning of everything. Our conversations became a regular part of my days. He'd ask about books, and I'd recommend titles. But soon, those conversations shifted from the pages of novels to the details of our lives. Ethan was different. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel heard for the first time in a long while. One day, he came in looking more determined than usual. You know, Rita, you're the most interesting person I've met in this town. Why do you hide in here all day? He asked, leaning on the counter, a playful challenge in his eyes. I laughed, a sound that felt strange even to my own ears. Well, where else would I go? This town isn't exactly bursting with excitement. Ethan's response was quick. Maybe you just need someone to explore it with. How about dinner tonight? My treat. I hesitated, not used to this kind of attention. I don't know, Ethan. Come on, what's the worst that could happen? You spend an evening out with a guy who enjoys your book recommendations. Plus, I promised to make it worth your while. You can show me this hidden gem of a town, he coaxed, his confidence infectious. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. Okay, sure, but no fancy places. I don't do well with all that pomp. Ethan said, his smile lighting up the room. I'll pick you up at 7. Where's something comfortable? That night changed everything. Ethan showed me parts of the town I'd never seen despite having lived here my whole life. He made me laugh, a deep, genuine laugh that I hadn't known I was capable of. He listened to my stories, my dreams, and my fears, never once making me feel small or insignificant. As we walked back to my apartment, he stopped and looked at me, a seriousness in his eyes. Rita, I know we've only just met, but there's something about you. You're not like anyone I've ever known. You're genuine, and in a world full of fakes, that's rare. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. Ethan, He cut me off gently, placing a finger on my lips. You don't have to say anything. Just know that I see you, Rita. I see the person you are, and I like what I see. Ethan had always been the sweet spot in my day, making everything seem brighter with his care and affection. He had this way of making me feel seen, calling me beautiful, kind, and smart, things I hardly believed about myself. It was his warmth that won me over, making the idea of forever seem not just possible, but desirable. When he popped the question, it felt like a dream. Marry me, Rita. I can't imagine my life without you, he had said, his eyes shining with sincerity. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I breathed out, feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. But before we could get lost in the whirlwind of wedding planning, there was one crucial step we had to take, meeting his parents. Ethan had given me a heads up, a sort of pre-warning. My folks, they have a bit of a high standard for who I bring home, but don't sweat it, okay? They're going to love you once they see how amazing you are, he assured me, though his nonchalance did little to ease my nerves. I was a wreck before the meeting, rummaging through my wardrobe for something that screamed modest yet dignified. It felt like an impossible dress code to crack. Ethan, on the other hand, was the picture of calm, almost disinterested, as if the outcome of this meeting didn't weigh on him at all. You're overthinking it, Rita. Just wear what you're comfortable in, he said casually, which only frayed my nerves further. The day arrived, and I chose a simple blue dress that I hoped struck the right balance. As we drove to his parents' house, Ethan seemed more preoccupied with the music on the radio than the impending introduction. "You sure they're going to like me?" I asked, seeking some reassurance. They'll come around. Just be yourself," Ethan replied, his attention briefly flitting to me before returning to the road. His laid-back attitude felt jarring compared to the storm of anxiety growing inside me. Walking up to the door of Ethan's childhood home, my heart was pounding. His earlier warnings echoed in my head, painting a picture of the scrutiny I was about to face. The door swung open and we were greeted by Ethan's parents, their expressions hard to read. The dinner that followed was a minefield. Ethan's parents grilled me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than casual dinner conversation. "So, Rita, Ethan tells us you work at a library. Do you see yourself doing that long term?" his father asked, his tone suggesting he found my job lacking. I fumbled for an answer, trying to sound confident. "I love working there. It's fulfilling in a way I can't quite describe," I said, hoping my passion would be enough to win them over. Ethan was strangely quiet throughout, offering little support as I navigated the barrage of questions and veiled criticisms. It felt like I was alone on the battlefield, with Ethan retreating into a role of passive observer. As we drove home, the silence in the car was deafening. I couldn't help but feel disappointed, not just in the evening's events, but in Ethan's indifference. "I thought you said they'd warm up to me." I finally broke the silence, my voice tinged with hurt. Ethan shrugged, a frustratingly nonchalant gesture. "Give it time, Rita. They just need to get to know you better," he said, his words doing little to comfort me. After a few more dinners that felt more like interrogations than friendly meals, it was clear Ethan's folks weren't my biggest fans. They saw me as some kind of gold digger, which couldn't be further from the truth. I was never after Ethan's money. Heck, I barely knew about it until he brought it up himself. One evening, Ethan came home looking more serious than usual. "Babe, we need to talk," he said, avoiding my eyes. That's when I knew something was up. "What's wrong?" I asked, feeling my stomach tie up in knots. "It's my parents," he started, finally looking at me. "They're insisting we sign a prenup." The word felt foreign, bitter on my tongue. "A prenup?" "Yeah," he sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I know, and I don't care about it either, not when it comes to us. But they're adamant about it. They think it'll protect both of us, or whatever." I was hurt, not going to lie. It felt like they were already betting on our failure. But I loved Ethan more than I cared about his parents' approval or some stupid agreement. "Fine," I said, more sharply than I intended. "Let's sign it and be done with it. Your money, my money, whatever. I don't care. I just want you." Ethan looked relieved, and a part of me hated that. "Thank you, babe. I hate this as much as you do, but it's just a piece of paper. It won't change anything between us." So we signed the damn thing. Some lawyer his parents knew drew it up, making sure neither of us could touch the other's stuff if things went south. It felt like signing a declaration of distrust before we even started, but I pushed those thoughts away. I was in love, and love was supposed to conquer all, right? Our wedding was nothing grand, just the way I wanted it. A few close friends, an intimate ceremony, and the promise of forever. I moved to New Ethan's place shortly after. It was a nice house, nothing too fancy, but it felt miles away from my old apartment. Ethan's parents lived nearby, which I soon found out meant surprise visits that were more about checking up on me than anything else. Life with Ethan started off like something out of a fairy tale, but it wasn't long before the gloss started to fade, revealing the grim reality beneath. The shift wasn't overnight, but the signs were there, creeping in slowly, eroding what we had built. His mother, Linda, was the first crack in our perfect picture. She dropped by unannounced, her eyes scanning the house like she was taking inventory. "Remember, this is Ethan's house. Everything here is his." I tried to keep my cool, replying, "I'm well aware, Linda. I'm not here for your son's things. I love him." She scoffed. "Love doesn't pay the bills, dear. Just remember, if you ever leave, You leave with what you came with, nothing. One day, she paraded around the house, pointing out every piece of furniture, every appliance, every knickknack that Ethan owned. See this couch, Ethan's. That painting also Ethan's. Remember, dear, in case things go south, you have no claim over any of it, she said, her voice laced with venomous sweetness. It was as if she relished reminding me of my place in their world. Ethan's father, George, wasn't any better. He and Linda acted like they owned our house, not just visiting. They demanded coffee the moment they walked in, critiqued how I made it, too weak or too strong, then sat in front of the TV, expecting me to wait on them hand and foot. Grab us some of those chips, will you? And maybe wash those clothes piling up in the corner while you're at it, George would say, not even bothering to look at me. The worst part? Ethan never said a word against it. He'd laugh along, adding his own jabs. Yeah, she's still learning how to do things right around here. Give her time. I felt like I was losing my mind. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone else, someone cruel and dismissive. Do you even hear yourself? How can you let them treat me like this? I confront Ethan after his parents left. Babe, they're just set in their ways, you know how old people are. He'd shrug it off, making it sound like I was the one overreacting. They don't mean anything by it. Plus, you know we're on their dime. Can't bite the hand that feeds, right? That line hit me like a slap in the face. So that was it. I was just the freeloader, the girl who married into their little empire and had to play by their rules or get out. My job at the library, which I loved, was a joke to them. Just another reason to look down on me. The days blurred into each other, each one a repetition of the last, until that unremarkable Tuesday when everything changed. I was at work shelving books when I felt a sharp pain in my stomach, doubling me over. It wasn't just stress. It was something more, something worse. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling my nostrils. Lying in that hospital bed, I couldn't help but think how this was a new low, alone in pain and not a single message or call from Ethan. Just when I thought things couldn't get any darker, a knock on the door heralded a visitor I never expected. Rita Turner. The man at the door was dressed in a suit, holding a briefcase, looking wildly out of place in the sterile hospital room. Yeah, that's me. Who are you? My voice was weak, tired from the pain and the endless cycle of disappointment. I'm Michael Johnson, a notary. I have something important to discuss with you. His tone was formal, but there was something in his eyes that made me want to listen. I motioned for him to continue, curious yet piqued, despite the situation. It's about your great-uncle Edward Turner. He passed away recently and, well, you're his sole heir, Rita. He left you an inheritance. The words didn't make sense at first. Are you sure you've got the right person? I haven't seen him for 15 years, I questioned. Michael nodded. Quite sure. He was a private man, but always remembered you, wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Lying in the hospital bed, feeling a mix of confusion and anticipation, I watched as the notary prepared to delve into the specifics of my great-uncle's will. He cleared his throat, opened his briefcase, and laid out the documents in front of him. Rita, your great-uncle was a man of substantial wealth and taste. He left you quite the inheritance. We're not just talking about cash here, though there's plenty of that. $20 million to be exact. Michael began, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. I blinked, still trying to wrap my head around the numbers. $20 million? I echoed, feeling my voice crack. That's right, he continued, unfazed by my shock. But there's more. You're also inheriting shares in several large companies. These are not minor investments. We're talking significant stakes in some of the most stable and profitable firms out there. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what he was saying. Owning parts of companies I'd only heard about on the news seemed like a fantasy. And there's the property, Michael went on, flipping through the papers. An old, large house in one of the most prestigious areas. It's not just any house, Rita. It's a mansion with history, acres of land, and it's all yours now. I tried to imagine the house, the kind of place I'd only seen in movies. It was overwhelming, to say the least. Don't forget about the antique car. he added with a slight smile, as if anticipating my reaction. A classic, fully restored, and in mint condition. It's a collector's dream. I chuckled, the situation bordering on surreal. An antique car, too. What am I going to do with that? I barely drive as it is. Michael's smile widened. Well, it's yours to do with as you please. Maybe take it for a spin now and then. And then there's the furniture and paintings inside the house. Genuine antiques, some of them centuries old. Your great-uncle had an eye for the finer things in life. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as I tried to digest everything he was saying. So I've inherited a fortune, a company, a mansion, an antique car, and a collection of art and furniture? That's unbelievable. It's all yours, Rita. Your great-uncle wanted to make sure you were well taken care of. It seems he saw something special in you. Special? I felt anything but, especially lying in a hospital bed after the worst few months of my life. Yet here I was, a millionaire many times over, entrusted with a legacy I didn't know existed. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. This is a lot to take in. I don't even know where to start, I admitted, feeling a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. We'll take it one step at a time, he assured me. I'm here to help you through the entire process. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Ethan's name flashed on the screen for the first time in days. Ignoring it, I turned back to Michael. What happens now? We'll need to process some paperwork, but the inheritance is yours. Your life is about to change, Rita. Change it did. After the unexpected windfall landed in my lap, Ethan and his folks turned a new leaf, or so it seemed. Their daily hospital visits were like scenes from a sappy movie. Ethan, who couldn't be bothered to check on me before, now hovered constantly, adjusting my blanket with a concerned furrow on his brow. How are you feeling today, love? He asked, his voice dripping with a sweetness that didn't reach his eyes. His mother, Linda, was even more theatrical, if possible. Darling, I'm going to cook your favorite lasagna when you get back home. Just you wait, she said, her smile wide but not quite reaching her eyes. It was all too much, too sudden. Yet I played along, smiling weakly, thanking them for their care. But suspicion gnawed at me, urging me to look beyond their acts. So one day I did just that. After their routine visit, I mustered the strength to slip out of my bed and follow them, my heart pounding with every step. Hiding behind a corner, I listened in as their true selves unfolded, with no audience to perform for. Their laughter was the first thing I heard, harsh and jarring. Can you believe how easy it is? She's terribly stupid. She's eating right out of our hands, Ethan said, a chuckle escaping his lips. Linda was more calculating, her voice sharp as she laid out their plan. Make sure she makes a baby with you, Ethan. Once she does, she won't ever be able to leave us. Then we'll have a real hold on her and her fortune. Their words, cruel and cold, didn't shock me. Disappointment filled me, yes, but surprise. Not in the slightest. They showed their true colors, and I was dumb painting over them in shades of denial. Silently, I made my way back to my hospital bed, their mocking words fueling a fire within me. They saw me as nothing more than a ticket to wealth, a means to secure their future. But I wasn't going to play their game, not anymore. Lying in that bed, a plan began to take shape, clear and firm. I was going to turn the tables on Ethan and his conniving family. They underestimated me, saw me as weak, but I was about to show them just how wrong they were. Back at the house after being discharged, I felt like a stranger walking into what was supposed to be my home. Ethan and his parents were there, waiting, their faces painted with fake concern and eagerness. The atmosphere was thick, charged with unspoken tension and expectation. Ethan was the first to break the silence, his voice a blend of faint sweetness and underlying greed. Babe, you're home. How are you feeling? We've been so worried about you. Ignoring the lump in my throat, I met his gaze squarely, seeing the man I once thought I knew. I'm feeling better, thanks, but we need to talk. All of us, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Linda, ever the actress, stepped forward, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. "Of course, dear. We're here for you, whatever you need." It was now or never. I took a deep breath and laid out my cards. "I'm filing for divorce, Ethan. And before you ask no, you won't see a dime of my inheritance." The room fell silent, the air sucked out of it as if by a vacuum. Ethan's face paled, his mask slipping to reveal the panic underneath. "Divorce? But why? I thought we were happy." "Happy." The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "You, your mom, and your dad have made my life a living hell. You've treated me like a servant, not a wife. And now suddenly you're worried about me because I'm worth something to you?" Ethan stammered, struggling to find the words. But Linda, always quick, jumped in. "This is nonsense. We've always treated you like family. You're imagining things, dear." Rolling my eyes, I pulled out the prenuptial agreement from my bag, waving it in front of him. This is what saved me. You thought you could play me, but I'm not the knave girl you took me for." George, silent until now, finally spoke, his voice a mix of anger and defeat. "You'll regret this. We're your family." "No, you were never my family. A family doesn't treat one of their own like dirt and then turn sweet when money comes into the picture. I'm done here. Moving into my own place was the breath of fresh air. I desperately needed the apartment. It was small and cozy, a stark contrast to the life I'd left behind. It wasn't just a new living space. It was my declaration of independence, my fresh start. The phone call started almost immediately. Ethan, with his voice dripping with desperation, was the first to break the silence. "Rita, please, you've got to come back. We can work this out. I know we can." His pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done, and no amount of begging could change that. "Ethan, it's over. I'm not coming back. You need to accept that," I said, my voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. Not long after, Linda chimed in, her tone a toxic mix of anger and guilt-tripping. "I'm grateful. After everything we've done for you, you owe us Rita. You're making a huge mistake." "Oh, owe you for what, Linda?" "For making me feel like nothing more than a burden? No, I don't owe you anything." Goodbye, hanging up on her, felt like shedding a heavy weight. A final cut from the ties that bound me to a life of misery. The divorce was a relief, a clean break from a past that had threatened to consume me. Through friends, I heard about the fallout between Ethan and his parents. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very document they had insisted on, the prenuptial agreement, was now the source of their family strife. With my great-uncle's inheritance securely in my name, I found purpose and generosity. A significant portion went to charities that mattered to me, causes that would make a difference in the world. But it was the bookstore that became my passion project, a cozy haven for lovers of old and rare books. It was my way of reconnecting with the world on my terms. My journey hadn't been easy, fraught with challenges and hardship, but standing in my bookstore surrounded by the stories of countless others, I knew I had found my happy ending. It wasn't just about moving on from Ethan and his family's manipulation. It was about rediscovering who I was and what I loved. Here's to new beginnings. I toasted to myself one quiet evening after closing up shop. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, filled with possibilities and the promise of newfound happiness.